Next question.
What do you got?
What are your favorite podcasts and why? Hashtag name dropping is okay.
So anybody that listens to me, there's a couple podcasts that I listen to, and they're really obvious, and they're like the big podcasts. You got, Tim Ferriss, boom, right? You got Joe Rogan, boom. You got Sam Harris, boom. And you got Hardcore History with Dan Carlin, and he's got another one that's called Common Sense. And all those are really, really good podcasts. And I've been listening to podcasts for many, many years now. Before listening to podcasts was cool, I was listening to podcasts.
Of course.
Oh, I actually grew up listening to radio shows. I've talked about that before, but I have, and I forget. I cannot remember how I got into podcasts. I do not remember how I got into podcasts. But anyways, whenever I got into podcasts, those are the kind of the ones that I listen to. And I sample a lot of other podcasts, and sometimes I'll search for certain topics and I'll just listen to a random podcast. But there's one more, the only one that I have that's like not on the main sites and in people's view is a podcast called Martyr Made. And it's by a guy named Daryl Cooper. And I can't recommend that podcast strongly enough. It's outstanding. It is an outstanding podcast. And Daryl Cooper, I don't even know, like, he's just this underground guy. I think he was in the Navy, but he's not anymore. He doesn't do it. It's not like a profession for him, but it should be. He should be. It's a great podcast. So check out Martyr Made. It's also he's on Twitter under Martyr Made is his call sign, but he's got like 142 followers. Like no one knows about him. No one knows about him. And actually, you know what? It was somebody on Twitter. And I forget who it was. It was somebody on Twitter that told me about Martyr Made and just said, check it out. And when people tell me to check something out, man, I check it out. And as soon as you open it, you're gonna realize why it's so good. Really detailed, really very good historical research, and it's a great podcast. And those are and you know what? I'm a really picky podcast guy too. Like I need somebody somebody needs to bring it on their podcast for me to like it. I try new podcasts all the time, and I don't get a lot of repeat customers myself. Like I don't repeat a lot, because it needs to be really, really solid. That's right. for me to invest hours worth of my time. Yeah. That's got to be a heavy investment. Yeah. And it's got to be something that's worth my while. And that's why those that I mentioned, let me grab I'm just seeing if on my phone, if there's any others that I might have missed. But I don't think as far as like massively good ones that I can recommend across the board, those are them. And there's other ones that I'll occasionally listen to, but and those are all kind of like the popular ones that come out. Donko Jones has got a good podcast that he interviews, talks about rock and roll. I dig that one, only because I really dig Donko Jones, the band as well.
The Martyr Made one, is that like, what's kind of the format with that one? Does he have guests?
It's similar to Hardcore History. Gotcha. It's him. It's Daryl Cooper just talking about, and that one, I think it's going to be his. It's about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It goes all the way back to the beginning and talks to you about what it is and what it's about, and it's really good. So those are the main podcasts that I listen to. Again, you've got to, and it's just a big investment of time. Yeah. And especially because I don't have a commute, so I don't drive anywhere. So, and I can't do anything mentally and do a podcast at the same time. Right. And listen to a podcast. So I can't read and listen to a podcast. It doesn't work. The only thing I can do is drive and do yard work. Like anything that's, Like, actually, when I have a big project to do at the house, I love it because I can get it all caught up on podcasts and whatever. So
Yeah. But, you know what that is? You know, girls can do that. You know that?
I was not aware of that.
Yeah, so this is how it is. This is how it works. Girls can, they say, I don't want to be dismissive and call it multitasking because it's more deep than multitasking.
Mm-hmm.
Girls can do things that require like attention. They can do more than one. And then guys can't.
I would be impressed by a girl that could listen to a legit podcast and read a book and get like the full value out of both of them.
Yeah, so how girls' brains are wired, they can do that a lot better than guys, and guys can't. But how's this, though? This is kind of interesting. And I used to do this all the time to mess with girls. Guys have a different spatial awareness than girls do.
True.
So one of the tests that was done, it was like, I want to say 16, I don't know the numbers, but it was a classroom just full of guys, a classroom full of girls, and they'd run all these tests. There's different tests, but one of them was, you have to draw a bicycle. That's it. Mm-hmm. So a bicycle is this kind of, in a way, kind of this unique thing when you draw it, because you have to know where this goes because that affects, the pedals got to affect the chain. That affects, it proved, or it indicated spatial awareness, right? So of the experiment, all the guys could do it. You don't have to be an artist. Some bikes didn't look amazing, but they were working. You don't have to be an artist, and it doesn't matter if you're a bike rider too. So all the guys could do it. You know how many of the girls could do it?
No.
None.
Really?
None. Yes. So, and I've done this experiment, and if you're going to do this experiment, do it correctly. Don't be like, hey, here's a bike, copy this bike. Don't cheat on it. Really, if you really want to get to the bottom, ask a girl, any girl, woman, no matter what age, draw a working bicycle. They can't do it. I've yet to come across a girl that can do it.
I'll be trying that tonight when I get home to my,
as a guy,
my daughters and wife.
As a guy, it's pretty. Most guys will do it. Yeah, it's weird. But anyway, it's just how the brains are different.
Well,
there's other fun stuff too.
For me, it is very difficult to actually engage in a book and reading or writing while I'm listening to someone else talk about something intellectual. Right. It's very challenging for me.
Yeah, fully.
To get the full value. I mean, I can do it, but both efforts are half-ass, and I won't get anything out of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any podcast you listen to that I didn't mention?
Strangely, it's the same thing, except for the Martyr Maid one.
How could you not listen to Martyr Maid? I've told you about that a bunch of times.
Like you said, scarcity of resources, man. Yeah. That resource being time. But nonetheless, actually, even though the ones I do listen to, I don't listen to as much because I don't drive as much, and I don't do as much yard work anymore. Except for that London Real one, the one that you were on, that guy. Yeah. I've actually, he's on my...
he's not a podcast, though.
It is.
Really?
Yeah, I'm subscribed to it, yeah.
I didn't know it was an actual podcast. I thought it was only YouTube.
I think it's like he takes the audio and puts it
on. Okay. Well, there's another one.
Good. Yeah, he does it. And that's the thing. Like, a lot of times people will, like...
That's Brian Rose with London Real.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's a good suggestion. He gets some cool people on his show.
Yeah, and really, I mean, put real simply, it's an interview.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of podcasts, like even Tim Ferriss, is mostly like just interview. You know?
Oh, Tim Ferriss is actually absolutely an interview.
Yeah. So, and then you have Joe Rogan, who's kind of like
conversation,
kind of an interview, but it's more of like they're just talking as a conversation. So there's like all these little different subtleties that makes them different, but it takes a lot of skill to interview people good. And this the London Real guy,
Brian
Rose, he's good down to like who he chooses. They're like pretty much across the board. Everybody's interesting. Yeah. And even if the subject isn't your thing, okay, but the guys he chooses for those subjects are pretty solid.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And I really do. I really like podcasts a lot, and you can get so much information out of them. And I love the audio format.
Yeah.
You know,
me too, yeah.
it's just great when you can just sit down and listen. And that's always what I've said for this podcast. Like, I want it to be something where people sit down and kind of put their headphones on and say, okay, I'm getting ready to press play. 3, 2, 1, here it comes.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, we're doing a Q&A, and obviously Q&A doesn't have that same level of impact as if I'm going to read something either that I wrote or something that somebody else wrote that's a very important subject matter that we're going to break down. Then that's sort of that's what I like.
Yeah, these Q&A ones are cool because it is like, of course, we're just having a conversation about this stuff, but there's a third person in the room as well for every question because it's their question.
Yeah, that's true. And that's one thing that's interesting. Like when you're listening to any of these podcasts that I talked about, you're basically a third person in the room sitting there listening to the conversation. And actually, when I was on Sam Harris, your brother drove up with me, and he was in the room listening to the conversation. Right. It's kind of interesting. But when you're listening to Joe Rogan, and actually one thing that's pretty cool is I've done an interview with Sam Harris, I've done an interview with Joe Rogan, I've done an interview with Tim Ferriss. I've had some good conversations with Dan Carlin, and I might end up being on Common Sense at some point. But with the other three, with Daryl Cooper, I don't know him, but I know those guys. I know them, and so when I'm listening to their podcast, I do feel like I'm kind of in the room with them, and sometimes I want to like answer and say something and whatever. So, and I think everybody, I think even people that never met Joe Rogan. Right. But they listen to all of his podcasts. They think they're in there with him.
Yeah. So when I went, I did a thing with Joe Rogan, played pool with him, and I went up to that studio before. And
where'd you go up for? With Halleck or something?
I went for Halleck.
Okay.
With for some stuff. So that time when I went up, I asked him, "Hey, do you encounter people who basically feel like they know you, like personally?" And they'll just roll into a conversation with you like you've known.
And he said absolutely.
He's like, every single time. Yeah.
No, that's the same. Even I'm experiencing that now. Yeah. When I meet someone that goes, "Hey man, I listen to the podcast." Hey, and they're like talking like, "Well, what's going on with Echo and blah blah blah," and they're like talking about me like we're bros. Yeah, and it's pretty cool.
Because in a way, you are. Because you've been talking to them for a long time.
I know. I was thinking about this. So like Hardcore History, the one podcast that is called Blueprint for Armageddon. If you haven't listened to it, just stop and go listen to it. It's awesome. But that thing it's 5 episodes for about 4 hours each. So that's 20 hours. And when you get done with it, man, you feel like you're pretty tight with Dan Carlin. I mean, that's 20 hours. And then one day I was doing the math last week, and because we got to 30 podcasts, and they're basically 2 hours each. And I'm like, oh my God, that's 60 hours, 60 hours worth of conversation with you and me. And so absolutely, people start feeling like, hey, oh yeah, I know what Jocko's going to think about this or say about this. And they're basically in the room here, talking to us.
Yeah. And there's that added element, which is going to make that even more so with us, because these are your questions. These are their questions.
Yeah, this is their questions. And I do converse with them on the interwebs too. So people are like, oh, and they'll hit me with a question. And sometimes it's not enough to get on the podcast, but I'll just say, yeah, don't do that. Right. Don't do that. That's not smart. Or yeah, no, that sounds like a good plan. Execute, stuff like that.
Yep. It's just the nature of the deal.
But yeah, get your podcast on and spread the word. Yeah. And by the way, thanks Tim and Joe. Those guys brought me on before I had a podcast. Tim brought me on when the book wasn't out. I was basically no human being knew who I was if you weren't like in the direct, like if you weren't in the SEAL teams with me. Right. And then Joe heard that podcast, and then we connected on Twitter, and he goes, "Come be on my podcast." And I was like, awesome. So, and then Sam Harris. So anyways, thanks to those guys for having me on and spreading the word a little bit.
Yeah, I like Sam Harris's one as well. That's actually one of the few that remember how we were talking before you did a podcast. Mm-hmm. We were like, oh, it'd be weird you just talking. Which actually thinking about it wouldn't be that weird, really.
Yeah. But I mean, if you think about like even the last podcast that we did where I just read the book 4 Hours in My Lay, you didn't say much. Right. And you said enough to maybe get me through some spots where you had a question or maybe I didn't make something clear. But I think I could do it, but I don't know why I would.
Yeah,
I'd rather just be talking to you
overall,
or whoever.
Yeah, overall, especially with the Q&A, and I think sometimes you'll go into things that doesn't apply to everyone's common knowledge. Mm-hmm. Maybe only military guys will know it, or only execs might know it. So I don't, there's a lot of stuff I don't know. So I have the luxury of being here. Wait, what is this?
Yeah, what are you talking about?
What does ROTC mean? Just kidding. I know what ROTC means. Anyway, but yeah, Sam Harris is good though, where he just does it solo. I've actually followed Sam Harris from the long time ago.
Yeah. He did the one with Scott Reitz from the LAPD. That's a good one.
Yeah.
And I like the Tim Ferriss one with Josh Waitzkin. He's got a couple with him. Josh Waitzkin's really, he's a jiu-jitsu player. He's a world champion chess guy. And just has an interesting attitude about stuff.
Yeah.
Makes me feel like, there's a lot more to learn out there about things. He wrote a book called The Art of Learning. Anyways, that's a really good one. Joe Rogan.
Scott Reitz.
So much of what Joe Rogan's always worth listening to.
Yeah.
And it's weird. Like, I pretty much with Joe, I listen to the people if I know the person that he's got on there.
Right.
And I don't listen to a lot of comedians, right? Because I don't know. I like comedians don't make me laugh.
That's the weird, not weird. That's the good thing about Joe Rogan because he has so many different elements of interest. You know, there's the comedians, the jiu-jitsu guys, MMA guys.
What he does really well is he makes people talk, and I've heard him get some criticism for, let's say he's got like a religious guy on there and he doesn't believe in religion, but he'll let that person talk about religion and won't like jump on them and get in their face and say no. But that's part of what makes it cool is like he's just trying to learn, man. He's not trying to confront people. Right. He's just trying to learn. And I think all those people do that for the most part. Yeah. They're people that are interested in learning and they're trying to figure stuff out themselves. And so I think it's cool that Joe Rogan's not getting in somebody's face about something they don't believe in. I mean, not that he doesn't disagree with people sometimes.
Right. Yeah, fully.
So that's that. Listen to some podcasts. And the other thing about this is like we're putting out one podcast a week. Mm-hmm. And that, I don't even know if that's sustainable.
Yeah.
Only because of time. I mean, the amount of time that it takes to prepare a podcast. In the beginning, it was pretty easy for me because I was doing a bunch of books that I already read. I already read them. I just crack them open, and most of those books I had well read. I mean, About Face, I already had that thing outlined and highlighted. Yeah. Last 100 Yards, already. I mean, a bunch of those beginning books were already done, and it wasn't until until everyone on Twitter started telling me, "Hey, check out this book," and now I'm all of a sudden reading books I've never seen before, and I got to read the book. And what I do is I read it and I go through it and highlight it. And somebody asked me this question too, like, how do you prep? So I read the book, I go through, I highlight the whole thing of what I think is impactful, what I think is important. But then once you read it, you can't just, you just don't pick it up and read the highlighted parts in order because that doesn't always make sense. And it also doesn't always have it doesn't make people think, it doesn't make me think about what I want to think about. It doesn't have the impact that I want it to have. So once I have it highlighted, then I have to go through, and plus I'll highlight, let's say I highlight half the book. Well, then you're not going to read half the book. Right. So then I got to go in and figure out what really is important. And then from there, I got to organize it in the way that the timeline that I'm actually going to read it aloud, and then make notes about whatever comments I have about it as I'm reading it, because that's sort of why I'm doing it, because I want to comment about what I'm reading, because otherwise people just go buy the book and read the book yourself. But I'm trying to give my perspective on some of it. And so that's challenging. And then the other weird thing is like, I meet people all the time because I travel all the time. I go to events and speak in companies that I'm working with, and a lot of times the people that are there that are totally into the podcast, they're not even caught up. They're not caught up with the podcast. And they're like, "Hey, I'm almost caught up." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" Yeah. "Oh, I fell behind because I blah 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 blah, and I'm only on 26 right now." And so sometimes I think, well, maybe we're just turning out at such a high rate. Right. But then there's some people that I've talked to as I think about like, well, maybe I need to slow down a little bit. And I've talked to some of the people that I work with and people that listen to podcasts that are into it. And I say like, we might go down to, once every 2 weeks. And it's like I just smacked them in the face. They're like, "No, you can't. No. I think it'd be, But sometimes I also feel that if I had more time, that I would be able to do a better job. Like maybe that's something I need to weigh as well. And if you think about like hardcore history, that guy, Dan Carlin, he just makes people, he tortures people, making them wait. Yeah. And it make you wait and wait and wait. And So I don't know. Maybe we need to go to once every 2 weeks. Maybe I just need to suck it up and just keep doing. I don't know. Maybe I don't know yet. But yeah. The one thing that's good about all these other podcasts is that gives you an opportunity to go listen to something else.
It's true.
Or you go back and re-listen.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I don't know.
We will see. I'm sure we might get some feedback on that one.
Yeah. So
if you out there thinks you'd be okay with us going every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Or if it's going to ruin your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it probably takes 15 to 20 hours now. I'm a slow reader. So when I'm reading a book, I read at the same pace that I talk. Now, when I'm on the podcast, I'm talking a little bit slower than I normally talk, but when I'm reading about the pace I'm speaking right about now. Right. This is just a normal. And what's good about it, and I learned this in college, when I read and I'm reading at this pace, I remember just about everything that I read. If I read fast, a la Tim Ferriss and speed reading, I don't retain the same amount. And so I read slow, I absorb, I'm thinking about it, I'm making some notes. So to get through a book, it takes 10, 15 hours.
Right.
So then you get through with that. Now you got to go back through it again and decide what the actual script timing that you're going to read it.
Right.
So now I'm like marking up the book and I'm going back and I'm writing the page numbers and I'm tabbing it out. That takes a few hours, 3 hours. Yeah. And so by that's all said and done, you're talking about 20 hours, 15 to 20 hours to prep. And
every single week.
Like today or yesterday, I got done prepping for this podcast, or actually I got done prepping for the 4 hours in Miley. As soon as I got done, I literally picked it up. I stood up at my bookshelf and I started looking. Okay, what's coming next? Because I want to start reading it now.
Yeah. Dang.
Yeah.
But that's the Jocko preparedness.
Yeah. Hyper preparedness, right? Yeah. Hyper preparedness, and also it's because like I said earlier, when somebody presses play on the podcast, I want them to be getting a piece of quality material.
Right.
I'm not going to turn out something that's just crap. I would rather not do it at all. I'd rather shut down and take a 6-month break or a lifelong break and never do it again than just start turning it out for no reason.
Bro, you escalated that real quick.
Yeah, I know,
lifelong
but
break.
You know why? You know why I did that? Because I have to maintain that attitude of like I'm not doing this. I'm doing this because I want to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yep. I'm doing this because I want to do it. And if I don't want to do it, then I'm not going to do it.
Right.
And it is, I mean, like I said, I like to hit play on a podcast and be like, okay, this is it. Just like sitting down to listen to great music or anything like that. That the podcast for me is like that. It's like reading a great book. It's like watching a great movie. It's sitting down, pressing play and going, okay, this is going to have impact on me. And so I want to turn something out like that. I don't want to turn out second-rate stuff. I want to turn out something legit.
Yep.
And if I fail to do that, then I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
At least now I'm saying if I was failed to do it, but I was trying my hardest, okay, I might continue because I'm trying and I'm making, but if I was failing to do it because I wasn't putting the effort into it, then I'm not going to do it. Cause I think that my personal expectations and the expectations that people have when they press play, they want to get something good.
Yeah.
They want to get some quality. They want to learn something. They want to enter into the game. Whereas if they start pressing play and they hear garbage, man, I don't want them to hear that. And I don't want to be that. That's not my gig. My gig is going hard, putting out hard, and putting out something that people want to listen to because it helps them. Not doing it just to do it. That's not my thing.
Yeah. And if you start slipping in that regard, bro, you can smell it from a mile away, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll tell you what, though, one thing I have realized when I first started, I thought, oh, well, I don't know. There's only so many books, that I could actually do. Because I'm thinking books that had impact on me, real legit impact.
Yeah.
There wasn't some huge list.
Right.
But as soon as I started going down the path, now I realize that there's literally I'm not going to be able to do in my lifetime all the books I want to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially when you start kind of enlisting other people to make suggestions. You're
which people are enlisted, though. Every trooper out there is sending me 2 or 3 books and saying, hey, check this out. My Amazon bill, click through to Jocko Podcast, click through to Amazon. We got it going on because half that money's from me because I'm ordering books all the time. When somebody says, hey, check this book out, I don't have time to play around. You know what I do? I just order it. I just click through, order it on Amazon.
Yeah.
I'm literally getting a new bookshelf in my house.
Dang.
Because I've got so many books piling up. And yeah, that to me, what's good about it, I love this guy. Now, this is another thing. And I told you this early on. Because early on you said, hey, it was like 3 weeks into it. You're like, hey, I don't know if we're going to be able to keep up this pace. And I said, you know what? I like this grind. I want to be maxed out. I want to have the pedal down. And you know what? I want to be going hard. And I think the people that listen to the podcast are people that are going hard in their respective lives. They're working hard. They're making things happen. They're being aggressive. And that's what I'm doing here. That's what we're doing here. And so I think that's why it resonates with some people. Yep. And there's some people that are listening to this that know that they got to step it up a little bit, and that also is a good thing. Yeah. I don't think there's too many people that are like, Jocko, get it together. You need to get your game on. They know I'm bringing my A game, right? Mm-hmm. I'm bringing my A game, and people know that. But the day that I can't bring my A game, then a couple things. Maybe it's time, okay, you know what? I need more time because I don't want to turn out crap. Mm-hmm. Or I don't do it anymore. Or we do it whenever. But I like being driven. I like a deadline. I learn a lot from the podcast, from getting ready for it. Because you got to remember, I read a book. So you got a little bit by listening to an hour of me talking about a book. I read a book. I absorbed it. I highlighted it. I outlined it. I researched it. I looked up, oh, that general, he sounds like an interesting guy. Let me just do a real quick fact check to see if there's anything in the behind the scenes I need to tell about him. Oh, you know what? There's a poem that's related to this. I'm digging out poems that I didn't know, didn't understand. Yeah. And reviewing them. So all these little things that, and who knows? I mean, should this be the full-time job? I don't know, And by the way, the whole time that I'm doing this, I got a business, with Leif that we're traveling and working with companies. I got other books in the hopper that I'm writing currently, and I have to spend time doing that, which I'm super pumped about those as well. But like those, that takes time. So yeah.
Dang.
But again, you know what? Bring it on. Bring it on. Bring it on.
I'm going to
jump in there. I'm going to answer your Twitter questions. I'm going to deliver some podcast, yeah, boy, and make it happen.
Some people choose to get after it.
Red line.
And we encourage that.
Red line. That's what I'm talking about. I'm going to red line this bad boy.